If you've been following my weekly market updates, you've seen the greater Orlando housing market gradually settle into a more balanced rhythm. And this week's numbers continue that story. Activity cooled a little, but buyers are still buying, sellers are still selling, and one of the biggest pressures we've been watching, price reductions, actually improved this week. Let's take a look at the last 7 days. We had 141 new listings come on the market, compared to 166 last week. At the same time, 138 homes went pending, down slightly from 147. But here's what I find interesting. There were only 3 more new listings than pending sales. So even though overall activity slowed, buyers are still absorbing nearly all of the new inventory coming onto the market. That's an important sign that buyer demand remains very much alive. Now, let's look at closings. 137 homes sold this week, compared to 152 last week. Again, we're seeing slightly lower activity across the board, which isn't necessarily surprising as we move through the second half of August. But homes are still selling every day. Now, let's talk about the number I've been watching very closely all summer. Price reductions. Last week, we reached 283 price reductions, the highest level we'd seen in nearly 2 months. This week, that number dropped to 240. That's about a 15% decline in just 1 week, and the lowest number we've seen since early July. That's encouraging. It could mean sellers are becoming more realistic about pricing from the beginning, rather than listing high and adjusting later. But 1 week doesn't make a trend, so this is definitely something I'll be watching. There were also just 20 price increases, so buyers are still clearly focused on value. Another number that moved this week was homes coming back on the market. We went from 39 last week to 47 this week. That's something to monitor, but 47 is right around the range we've seen throughout much of July. Remember, homes can return to the market because of inspections, financing, insurance, appraisals, or simply because a buyer changed their mind. For sellers, the opportunity is absolutely still there. The fact that we had 141 new listings and 138 pending sales tells us buyers are still actively absorbing inventory, but they're selective, pricing correctly from day one, preparing the home properly, and making sure your property stands out from the competition continue to be incredibly important. For buyers, you still have options and negotiating opportunities. But here's something I think is important to remember. A balanced market doesn't mean every home is sitting. The best homes, those that are well-priced, well-maintained, and in desirable locations, can still move quickly. So take your time, do your homework, but be prepared to act when the right opportunity comes along. We've now been tracking these numbers week after week for nearly 2 months, and despite the weekly ups and downs, the overall story really hasn't changed. The greater Orlando housing market continues to normalize. Buyers have more choices. Sellers are becoming more realistic about pricing. Homes continue to sell, and we're moving toward a market where neither side completely controls the conversation. This is a market that rewards preparation, realistic pricing, and patience. For sellers, pricing for today's market, not yesterday's, is critical. For buyers, there are opportunities to negotiate, but good homes still require decisive action. And for everyone, understanding what's happening at the local level is much more important than simply following national headlines. Remember, these numbers reflect residential activity in my immediate Southwest Orlando service area. If you're curious about the greater Orlando market or want to know what's happening specifically in your neighborhood, reach out. I'd be happy to put together a personalized market analysis for you. I'm Efrain Reyes with Coldwell Banker Realty, and I'll see you next week with another Greater Orlando market update.